begin that recording right now. Link to the program will be available on the Academic Archivist website, we hope by the end of this week. If there are any colleagues that you know of who could not attend today, please let them know. And the web address for that is academicarchivist.wordpress.com. And Academic Archivist is spelled as one word, academicarchivist.wordpress.com. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's program. Rachel Seale is the Outreach Archivist at Iowa State University, Special Collections and University Archives. Rachel has been a member of the SAA Committee on Public Awareness since 2017 and is currently serving as Vice Chair. In 2018, she presented at the Midwest Archives Conference Fall Symposium with Anna Trammell and Cara Stone on instruction and assessment in special collections and archives. In 2020, Rachel was elected to serve on the Midwest Archives Conference nominating committee. And Cara Stone is an instruction librarian at Iowa State University in Ames. She is active in Iowa's library associations, having served on both the Iowa Library Association, the ILA, and the ILA Association of College and Research Libraries executive boards. In 2016, Cara founded the ILA Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, and she served as chair through 2019. She also co-leads the Iowa Private Academic Libraries Information Literacy Interest Group annual workshops. And with that, I will turn it over to Rachel and Cara.
Hello, thank you for having us, David. We are going to start. I'm Rachel Seale. My pronouns are she, her, hers. We're going to start our presentation with a land acknowledgement. There we go. So Iowa State University is located on the ancestral lands and territory of the Bakotse, or Iowa Nation. The United States obtained the land from the Meskwaki and Sauk nations in the Treaty of 1842. We wish to recognize our obligations to this land and to the people who took care of it, as well as to the 17,000 Native people who live in Iowa today. For those joining us today from other locations, we urge you to take the necessary time and learn about the land where you currently find yourself and the indigenous peoples who have lived and continue to live on the lands. Then we've included a link that allows you to see what land you're on. A visual description of myself. I am a mixed race Filipino and white female woman of in my early 40s with dark hair, wearing a striped dress, and my background is my office, a messy bulletin board, and a whiteboard. And my credentials, besides what David had given, is I coordinate instruction in my department, and I also do construction in my department. And in 2017, I attended the Librarians Active Learning Institute at Dartmouth, and I learned a lot there. I'll let Cara introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Cara Stone. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I have blonde hair and white skin, and I'm wearing a black cardigan and a blue shirt. And my background is my closet because the rest of my room is messy with my sewing projects. So we get to look like we have a little bit of a hostage video here. And my background is I've been a librarian since 2011. Prior to that, I was a public educator and still am a licensed educator holding a teaching license in the state of Iowa. And I'm in my late 30s. So go ahead.
So Ken and I, we collaborated on a all-day workshop for Fall Mac Symposium with our colleague Anna Trammell, and that's why we were invited to speak today. David, we worked with David for that. He was he is an active member of MAC, and he remembered and he asked us. We do want to acknowledge that we have experience to share, but we know there are a lot of experts in this room today already, in this Zoom room. And we're excited to use about half of today's time. If you look in the overview for today's agenda, we're going to try to get all of this done in half the time. And then we have time, the other half of the time, we want to brainstorm with you all, have you share your expertise. I know it's out there, and to share, sympathize, and connect with each other today. Please do share as we go through. Feel free to add resources in the chats. I think that'll be a helpful way to engage throughout. Do you have anything to add, Cara?
Yes. No, I mean, no, sorry. I was just talking.
That's okay. So we're primarily talking about one-shot sessions. I know some people do semester-long courses, but this is really focusing on one-shot sessions. As you can see from the meme, this famous meme, we've all had to manage an instructor's expectations. In the end, giving the students an orientation to your space, an idea of what's in your collection, and the tools they may need for their visit is about all you can realistically hope for with a, maybe 50, 60 minutes you have with them. I often have faculty or instructors who, they want a whole lot more. They're usually happy with what I can give them. I always acknowledge their desired outcomes, and then I set my own, and mine are more realistic. I want them to be comfortable coming in. I want them to be comfortable contacting us before they visit, all that stuff. And then one way to help students familiarize themselves with the collections is to prioritize what you show them and what the interactive, make sure it best meets their immediate needs. This is going to be hard for a lot of you, and it's hard for me too, but you want to be a minimalist in the classroom. Don't show them all the stuff. Send them off with a list and maybe short descriptions of collections to keep in mind when they get started. Make sure you don't make them connect the dots on what you're showing them. Let them know why the material is relevant. Be clear that you're curating. This is, there's a lot more material, but you've curated selecting material for their assignment. And keep in mind, and I don't know if it's just my students, but they often haven't even seen the assignment yet. So I'll refer to it, and the instructor has shared it with me. But we're visiting, we usually get squeezed in the first two, or, second or third week of the semester, sometimes the first week, and they don't even know what the assignment is. I've already looked at it, they haven't. So I try to keep that in mind. It's a lot of information for them to take in and then to try to remember in 3 or 4 weeks when they come visit this. So you can also try to give them tutorials. I know some people have had success with that, guidelines or readings ahead of time. That doesn't usually work for me. But even if they don't get to it before they actually visit, they'll have something to reference after their class visit and before they visit your archives. And finally, for outcomes, try to get feedback in class through a short written, like a minute, that has 1 or 2 questions. What did you learn today? What was the most interesting thing you learned today? Something, maybe give them a minute. I find that to be more helpful than, just surveys where they fill out numbers on how well you did teaching them. Leaving time for this 1 minute reflection is probably the hardest part of implementing it, but I would recommend you do it. Moving on to time. As I said before, really practice minimalism when you're pulling materials for class, especially for online teaching. We always pull too much, which is great because you have backup, but you want to focus on the students' engagement, not overwhelm them with content. Keep in mind that discussions take more time online, typing, raising hands, awkward, empty Zoom rooms. You can't make eye contact with students like you can in person to kind of guilt them into engaging with you. Transitions take longer, whether it's technology, things freeze, but it just takes longer. So again, especially online, be really intentional and minimalist on what you pick. Talking about space. I would encourage us not to think of space as virtual versus physical, but virtual and physical. As we're transitioning back to campus, I would ask you to continue exploring virtual classes and programming if you aren't already planning on doing that. It gives us access to more expertise. We can invite lecturers in, of course, still pay them their fees, but maybe you can save some money on travel expenses. Also the inconvenience of travel. It also gives more people access to our collections and our programming if we're doing it online. Our hours limit access. Sometimes our position in the building, sometimes our spaces aren't accessible to everyone. Parking isn't great on campus sometimes. Public transportation may not be great in the area you're in, or really limited. So being online, if we can be in their space or their classroom space or their institution space, another library space, that just gives us greater audience, greater connection, greater opportunity for collaborations. Imagine the possibilities. Also, thinking of virtual space, adding to your in-person space or your own virtual space. You can supplement historical narratives you're teaching the students using other institutions' digital collections that fill in any cultural gaps in your collections. I work in a predominantly white institution. We want to share other narratives that have been not represented. We don't always have the materials, but our colleagues do in other parts, of the state or the country. So, bring in other collections, even if it's just one item. If you record your lectures or programming, that's something you can also share out to others or recycle for other purposes. There's always limitations. Technology issues always crop up, but I'm an optimist and I think there's a lot more possibilities. For physical space translating to online space, know where your cameras are and what they show. Test your technology and have a backup plan when something goes wrong, because it always goes wrong. And
we found that out earlier today, right?
Yes.
So. All right, so this is when I get to nerd out with you and give you just a fire hose of resources for online activities, for tools that you can use with your students or with your classes or with your instruction. I'm not going to go into depth with all of them because y'all, we would be here for hours, but I am going to talk through a few things, and I've linked to as many things as possible. And I've also kind of categorized things to the way that they make sense in my mind, but also you can take these tools and use them in a variety of ways. So I like using a variety of tools in my instruction because multiple modalities really help us get engagement with our students. An online whiteboard can help us augment when we're having to shift to an in-person environment, or from an in-person environment to online, right? Like the brainstorming on the whiteboard or the collaborative work there. So all of these are here available for you. And also we will be using Jamboard later today. So let's just talk through some of these things. Okay, so if we're talking about polls and Q&A, obviously the things that are built into your online platforms are going to be really helpful, right? Like the polls and Zoom and WebEx, even though WebEx is its own thing. I have feelings about WebEx, but for those who love it, great. But also if maybe I came across using Slido, actually taking an American Sign Language course as a student, and I've really enjoyed incorporating that into my work. You can do polls, or you can just do it like an open Q&A. It's great for conferences as well, and people can upvote or downvote the open Q&A piece. Poll Everywhere is something that's been around for a minute, and Mentimeter is something a little bit newer, but also along those same lines. In terms of quizzes and games, there's a lot of things out there. Top Hat is something that our university makes students purchase, which is why I put like a little $sign warning, students have to buy this. I don't like making students have to buy extra things because life is expensive enough as it is, but that is something that maybe your campus is using, so that's an option for you. Socrative and Kahoot, again, are more of those quizzing, looking at the results, talking through the questions, kind of a tool. Canva just makes things pretty, and I like it when things are pretty. So that's an option for you. There are great free options within Canva as well. Meme generator, I like this. So that's an option as well. And Google Workspace, there's a lot of different things there. Google Workspace is the new name that they're using for the Google Suite, in case that's confusing. Jamboard, we're going to be using, it's basically like online Post-its that you can move around or group together. Similar, we're actually using Padlet later, excuse me, but it's a similar tool, and MindMeister is another mind mapping tool for you. And if you're like, oh my gosh, you're talking too quickly, I want to write down all these things, we have a link to all of our slides, which includes our contact information. You can get to all of these links yourself at any time. We'll keep it live for a long time. Video creation. Yes, we have been thrown in the deep end with video creation the last year and a half. Am I right? So the ones that I like the most, again, are the free things or the things that are built into the things that I already have. So Loom is a free Google Chrome add-on. I think that they also recently came out with an actual desktop app that you can use. I like it because it puts your head in a little bubble at the bottom of the screen. So even when you're talking or demonstrating or screen sharing, your head is still in the little bottom. So it keeps that kind of a personal connection. Toonly, Vyond, and Powtoon are all kind of cartoony explainer videos that you can make. OBS Studio is an open source video editing software. Screencast-O-Matic is another one of those. It's a very low cost screen editing tool that's I think made by the similar people as Camtasia, but I could be wrong. Camtasia is like the Hulk version of video editing compared to Screencast-O-Matic, which is kind of a low-key version of that. If you have Panopto for your institution, you can also do some great video work there, but it is an expensive institutional subscription. And if you're like, I have Zoom, I might as well just use it. You can definitely take Zoom and create a recording from it with no audience, with just yourself there in the corner, and it works very well as well. I also like to do screencasting with QuickTime on my Mac and use iMovie to cut out whenever I fumble over my words, which happens quite a bit. And then YouTube Studio, again, is another great tool to help you create captioning and make things accessible. Vimeo Create is something that I haven't necessarily used myself, but it's another one of those suite of tools that can be really helpful. Old school Windows Movie Maker is still hanging around, right? So we can absolutely keep that as a tool. Online video editing, I talked about Camtasia, which is a little bit of a more robust tool. And one tool that I hadn't thought of until I attended another webinar, and I don't remember which one because there's a million of webinars that have been happening during COVID times, but a teleprompter app can be really helpful when you are recording like an explainer video or doing that flipped classroom experience. Can be really helpful. So, and I think there are just a few more tools. So file storage, we got Google Drive, we got Box, we got Microsoft OneDrive, right? If you have another great file storage that you like even better than those, awesome. If you are maybe trying to do like a small scale open house, Gather, Social Chat, and Congregate can be really cool. So maybe like people can move around and join different conversations. It's a little more of an organic feel. And if you are in a class that's using a different communication channel beyond Canvas or Blackboard or your school's LMS, then see if maybe you can be added into the Slack group, or maybe you're doing more than a one shot with this group, having a Slack or a Discord, or setting up a remind, like, don't forget, we've got class, can be really helpful as well. Those are all tools that you can explore. And one thing, I mean, we've got stuff that we have to manipulate, right? We've got our document cameras and our computer to help us navigate the Zoom during class with our stuff. But one thing that I saw come through early in the pandemic was teachers in a pinch. Like, you're at home, you didn't get to get all your stuff there. If something just isn't working, maybe a quick hack is using a CD and a piece of tape and a quarter and a pencil and taping it above your laptop's camera to explore how that could serve as a quick, maybe not quick, but like a hack. So that is the lightning round of a lot of tools all at once. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to let Rachel talk now.
Thanks, Cara. So here are some resources to get you started on using a social justice framework when teaching with primary sources. In mid-May, the RBMS Diversity Committee and Instruction and Outreach Committee put together a webinar integrating critical race theory in teaching with primary sources, featuring Calais Warren, Rachel E. Winston, and Jeannie Zavala. Then last week, the committees continued the conversation and added these two additional readings to the discussion by Sophia Leung and Jorge Lopez McKnight and Andy Gustafson, Ana Lu Maria Lopez, Lael Hughes Watkins, and Elizabeth Smith Pryor. Some basic information I have learned from the webinar and the readings I'll share with you today, but I encourage you to go over them and check them out. Acknowledge gaps in your collection, bringing material from other collections in, as I mentioned before, if you need to in order to show students that there are records and documentation of these histories of historically oppressed communities. These histories include successes and innovations too, not only oppression, so make sure to include that and show that. Also state your positionality, yours in relation to the students, and your institutions in relation to students, and also the gaps in your collection. Explain to students how collections are acquired and how gaps are often intentional or have historically been intentional. And many thanks to the authors and presenters for sharing their knowledge and expertise, and the RBMS committee members who put these resources together to educate us.
Yeah. So how do we get from, we kind of think we know what we're doing, to like doing it, right? So some things to think about in terms of implementation and delivery is really understanding, and Rachel hit on this earlier, what are the instructor's expectations for me, for what I'm covering, and for how I'm covering it. So decide whether you're only delivering a live session or whether you're recording it live so that those who aren't able to make it can still view it after the fact, or are you flipping the classroom and recording something ahead of time? Those can all be important considerations. And then I really like to sit down with whoever the instructor of record is and really figure out how have they crafted their classroom climate? What are their expectations for participation and engagement? What can you expect of students, and what can you expect of the instructor during the session that you're teaching? So how they develop their culture. Do they require students to have their cameras on? Please don't require students to have their cameras on, right? Like it's just like popping into their whole house, and that can be awkward for them and for you. Also keeping in mind, like maybe their tech isn't what other people's tech is, and so it doesn't work as well. Or maybe there's just a weird blip in the technology systems that day, so having it required is a little scary or a little frustrating. Just issues of equity and care with that access. Thinking about their privacy. And knowing that, and we've all been in this, we're in it right now, where like just because somebody isn't participating in the chat, or if they're not on camera, it doesn't mean that they're not paying attention. It doesn't mean that they're not engaged. People engage in different ways online than they do in the classroom, and that's okay. Maybe they have online anxiety. Hello. Maybe they get nervous with the phone. Hello, that's me too, right? So just keeping that in mind, that like technology can sometimes bring forward anxiety in our students, and know that just because they're engaging in a different way doesn't mean that it's not meaningful for them. Can you, thinking ahead, like what's going to happen? Maybe you want to prepare digital facsimiles to share in case the physical item, something goes wrong. Just having that as a backup digital image can be helpful, unless of course you really are demonstrating this physical object and you're looking at the whole thing rather than the content within. And okay, so in terms of like checking my tech, making sure that everything is ready to go, having my expectations set, I love doing a run through with a colleague, and I'd be like, pretend that you are a first year student coming in, right? Like doing that run through not only tests the tech, but it also helps you test your activities and gets you really rich feedback from your colleagues. Also having a helper can be really nice. Sometimes the instructor of record can be that helper, but also just having somebody to like maybe a colleague pop in and help facilitate chat or answer questions while you're like yakking away because you're only working on a tiny laptop screen instead of multiple monitors, right? So having that extra person to help you is really valuable. So like we said, preparing ahead of time, having our tech loaded and checked, feeling familiar with your furniture and your physical setup, how far you can zoom in on the camera or whatnot. And just knowing, as we learned early today, tech fails happen. We have to change direction and try a new process, and that's okay. Having a backup, I have my hotspot here because sometimes my home internet is crummy. So knowing that I can switch over to that quickly is really helpful. And then maybe trying out breakout rooms, yes or no, what's your comfort levels, maybe practicing with those ahead of time. And thinking about accessibility of your content. How are you describing it? How are you using alt text with the materials that you're sharing? And equity of access, again, stable internet, webcam access, maybe not. And then the strategies you use for engagement. Are you using questions? What are the policies? Are you doing the whole I'm counting to 7 seconds and leaving awkward silence for them to process what I'm asking them and then maybe come forward with a response? Those are just a few things I like to think about in terms of implementation and delivery.
Hello. One thing I learned, and many of you probably already know this, but one thing I learned when I attended Lally was that a lot of the learning or processing what you've learned happens in reflection. So it's really important Start, stop, continue is one that Cara has taught me. So, questions you ask yourself when you're reflecting on the class that you just taught, what will you do next time? What can you start doing? What will you leave behind or stop doing? And what worked for you that you want to continue? Debriefing is really important. I usually end up debriefing with a colleague because they'll see me walk out of the classroom, ask me how it went. I'll have a chance to talk it out with them. Write it in a journal, notes on the lesson plan, just some way to reflect right after you teach, and then come back to it in a week to see, do you feel differently? Do you feel the same? Do you have new thoughts you want to add? Something else came to you, but don't just leave it sitting until you teach it again next semester. Also, make recordings. This is just a housekeeping thing. Making recordings available to classes after the fact. They can help you too if you want to review, your class, or and post to the class later. If you're collaborating with an instructor, they usually take care of this part for you. If they don't, then you can do that yourself.
So let's talk a little bit about self-care, because y'all, this has been a year where we needed some self-care. So I try to build in self-care early in the process as well. So thinking about, we talked through some of the logistics, but also how do you build in margins or buffers on the days that are your heavy teaching days? So I literally put on my Outlook calendar, like, this is what I'm teaching. This time before and after are my buffers to prepare, to get all my tech ready, to breathe, to reflect afterward, right? So just keep that in mind. Also thinking about what is your rule for how many instruction sessions, and or in COVID times, all of the online meetings that we're doing, how many big chunks of time are we willing to have on a given day, either dedicated to teaching or dedicated to meetings, and maybe setting up that rule to make sure that you are balanced, that you're healthy, that you're able to successfully plan your instruction and also do the rest of your job, because there's a lot of hats that we wear, right? I mentioned earlier, practicing ahead of time. You can record yourself. You can work on timing, work with the technology, with a word that's easy to mumble or fumble when you are having those tongue twisters, right? And inviting that colleague to watch you do a run through ahead of time. And then ways to build your energy. So this is going to sound nerdy, but doing theater warm-ups or doing physical warm-ups and voice warm-ups to keep your energy up, or doing like a playlist for yourself. I literally have like a pump it up playlist that I do before I do instruction. Sometimes I subject my students to this as they're coming into the room physically. Other times it's just like in my zone. I listen to it before I hop online. So doing things that keep you energized, engaged, lip trills, vocal sirens, stretching, body awareness activities, all of those things can be really, really helpful. And we have some resources for that. And my nerdy playlist linked on the last slide here as well. So, and then after.
So after class, as it says, stretch, drink water, like Cara said, buffer some time in, that you don't have to do anything else. You can come down from your instruction high. Look at something other than a computer if you can. That being said, I also have some social media accounts that we recommend you follow. Mindful in LIS was founded by Amanda M. Leftwich. I just found her. She taught a class on library juice for, I believe, self-care for librarians. So her social media, she promotes mindful practice and self-care within the profession. It's helpful even if you're not in the profession. And then also the NAP Ministry, founded by Tricia Hersey. This is not just an account, they're very active on social media. It's not just about, resting so that you can return to the grind culture and get all the things done. This actually is they have a rest is a resistance framework that names sleep deprivation as a racial and social justice issue. And their social media accounts, are very active and advocate against grind culture. They have performance art and do community organizing. So this really isn't just about, resting. It's fighting against that grind culture that I think is really present in academia or in any place, where things are always urgent but aren't actually really that urgent. And then there's also some meditation apps, Calm or Headspace. I don't know about Calm, but I know Headspace has free, I mean, you can pay for it and get more, but otherwise it has some other guided meditations for free as well. And feel free to drop any self-care suggestions you have into the chat also. There's been great information in the chat throughout.
Yeah, great comments. So now we're going to do, I think it's a fun activity because it helps me feel connected to others, and it also helps me feel like I'm not alone in the things that I have questions about or that I'm struggling with or that I'm brainstorming. So we're going to do a solution or sympathy activity. It's just a flexible forum for sharing questions, brainstorming, commiserating, and connecting. And I feel like it's great to just connect with folks, and I need that. So I'm subjecting you to my needs, basically. So how does this work? We're going to hop over onto this Padlet, and I will, maybe Rachel, can you share the Padlet for the link for the Padlet in the chat here shortly? So basically we're going to share ideas. Hopefully, I mean, respectful dialogue is important. We're all professionals here. We're all in different situations too. The struggles that one person is facing in the work environment are very different from the struggles that other people are facing. So I really am excited because we have experts in this room. We have how many folks? We have almost 70 experts in this room who want to steal all your ideas. So please share them, right? We can mix and match and find the things that we need. Be sure that you are leaving room for those who take more time to process, just like for our students, we want to be sure that we're leaving room for folks here. And keep in mind with confidentiality, the Padlet allows us to post anonymously. And so what we will do is we'll give some time to explore the Padlet space, to add your ideas, and then we'll just talk through them as a group, and we'll see how that works. If maybe unmuting or using the chat can be a good option. And then we'll come back and look at those additional resources at the end. But let's head over to the Padlet. I'm a fan. I'm a nerd as well. So welcome to my love of GIFs. The stuff that I talked through under community building is just up here as a little reminder, but also you can double click anywhere on this page. It's got lots of room. I put a little placeholder here so you can scroll up and down and just double click to add a new piece of information. You can give it a short title, like a general idea, and then you can add your greater content there. And let's say that you want it to be in one of these categories. So our three categories are solution. Oh my gosh, I need help with this. What are y'all doing? The sympathy section, like, oh, this has happened. I know there's no solution, but can you believe this? And then my bonus section is, what are your favorite tech activities, resources, must shares that you've done, especially in the last year, that you have loved and that you want to share? You can upvote things, I think, with once it's posted, with a little thumbs up and thumbs down. And then if you know that it goes in a certain category, you can right click on it, maybe. You can also edit it after the fact. Click the little dot, dot, dot and say pink, I need help. Blue, oh my gosh, this happened. Green, here's some great stuff that you need to know. And you won't be able to move other folks' stuff, but you will be able to see it. And maybe you can add like a little comment next to those if you're interested. So I'm going to set a timer, and I'm going to shut my mouth, and I'm going to put myself on mute so you don't have to hear me if I sneeze or if my dogs bark in the background. I'm going to set a timer for 7 minutes for us to just explore this space. You don't have to log in. You can just go ahead and click through. Link is in the chat. So everybody should be good to go there. If you have questions or any issues, pop in the chat and we'll go from there. But I'm going to go on mute for a full 7 minutes. I've got about a minute left on my timer, but I also know that some folks are definitely still writing because there's a lot to unpack and a lot to share. So from like a participant show of thumbs up, we're good to move forward, or maybe like a hand raise, give us another couple minutes. What are we thinking with the emojis for our participants? Let me pull up our participants here. How are you feeling? Got some thumbs ups. We're good to start chatting a little bit. Okay. All right, friends. I feel a lot when I'm reading through some of these things. Some of them I'm like, yes. And some of them I'm like, oh, I just, yup. You know what I mean? So let's start with the sympathy, because it's real, it's hard. There aren't necessarily solutions, but like, man, our hearts are with you. So we've done a lot of good work during the pandemic, but now I feel kind of burned out. Oh my gosh. Yes. Hello. Good to meet you. Here's a virtual hug because it's so real and it's so true. And I have a feeling there are a lot of people nodding their heads right now. Let's see here. Oof, I was set up for insubordination termination by my competition for the, oh my God. Also, I love the GIFs, friends, people after my own heart. Instruction anxiety, worried about instruction in the fall, had to return to pre-pandemic capacity, no social distancing or masks. University isn't requiring faculty, students, or staff to be vaccinated, and I'm fully vaccinated. Y'all, instruction anxiety person, like, yep. I love that we've got these little thumbs ups, not because we love it, but because I'm like, I'm right there with you. I am, yes. And there's no solution other than just like, I'm doing therapy to figure out how I feel about going back to work soon, right? In the physical environment, absolutely. I recently had to send a job request to the top of my workload for a very higher up admin. Ended up digitizing, oh my gosh, 2,000 pages of content for them in a week. Oh my gosh. Not even 3 weeks went by and their job was posted internally. So you did all of that work and then they're like, bye, thanks. Oh my gosh. It's hard when your priorities don't align with the people who make big decisions priorities, for sure. Let's see here. A professor requested that everything we have from a specific year be digitized for their class to use, but then wanted minimal instruction sessions. All I can say is I have feelings. And that's about as far as I can go. Let's talk through, we've got a great list of resources to share out. If you all have more, we can keep adding to those. We got WordPress, we've got students describing their research practices, which is fascinating and fabulous. I'm definitely going to check that out later. How to be a super researcher blog, content DM, yes. Wonder, I saw that in the chat. Thank you for adding it here so that we have a nice record of it centrally located. And vocabulary bingo. How do we navigate this space? How do we understand these words? Absolutely. Okay, now this is the part where I would love to see folks are welcome to unmute. They're welcome to raise a hand. And Rachel, can you, because I only have the one monitor, can you help me kind of monitor who's coming through? But let's talk through some of these things where we want help with. Like sometimes we don't want help. In these cases, we're asking for help. So some questions are, let's start with the platforms. What platforms are you using to share resources outside of your LMS? We have made a bunch of modules in Canvas, but are trying to move beyond to reach people outside the university, thinking more open access to your archives. There are some experts in this room, so I would love to hear from y'all. I can think of things like LibGuides, which are public pages, kind of helping bridge that gap, but it's different than a module. What are other folks doing? And also I'm a librarian, instruction librarian, not necessarily an archivist. So I want to know what you're doing because I'm curious. So if anybody has ideas, please share.
On the chat, we have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok from Heather. Thank you. And then Lena says Canvas does allow for making modules public, but your admin probably has to change that setting for you. Yeah. Let's see everybody.
So we've got here, I'll try and I'll download the chat and I will try and add some of the public comments from the chat into this space as well later.
Oh, all school publications are an Internet Archive. Thank you, Paige.
Yeah, and we did have a request to save the responses as a PDF to participants. What we can do, I'll try and do that as well, but also all of our slides, including the link to this Padlet, is going to be available to you on the SAA website, and also we put the link in the chat to the slides earlier as well. Let's talk about getting into the classroom, because this is like a perpetual struggle for anybody in libraries, I feel like, who's not the instructor of record. Right. So any suggestions on how to convince faculty that student engagement with primary source materials is a good use of classroom time? Any ideas? We've all been there. Ooh. Gwen says, participating in new faculty orientation was helpful for me. Yeah, they see you as a real human, and like connecting with them and saying, no, really, these activities will help improve outcomes for your students in your class. I promise. Here we go. Let's talk about it. Absolutely. Yeah. How else have you made those connections with faculty and like wiggled into their classroom time? Heather agrees with Gwen. In her experience, or their experience, most history faculty as well as English tend to appreciate the archives. Yes.
So
Rachel,
this is
what do you
sorry.
think?
I like to use my social network sometimes. Like I'm involved in, different works on campus that have nothing to do with the library. It's my university service. And I will plug our collections any chance I get. I encourage my colleagues to do the same. I think when, if you participate in any, like any kind of local conference that your faculty is going to attend, like something that, is university wide, like Iowa State has an iScore conference every February. It's on, it's like a little Iowa State version of the NCORE conference, talks about race and ethnicity. And, we have had our archives used. So we try to, when researchers come in and say they're going to do an iScore presentation, we try to show up, just to be a little more present outside of the archives if it's possible.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, I set up Google alerts for this faculty that I liaise to, so I know when they've published something new, like Google Scholar alerts or Google alerts in general. It's a little stalkery, but I feel like it's okay because it's me like wanting to reach out to them and be like, congratulations, I saw you're researching on this, or I saw that you're exploring this thing. In the comments, Philip Stone says, smallish college here, but networking in the faculty staff dining room, right? Proximity breeds familiarity, breeds comfort, and you can sneak in the vegetables, right? I love it. And literal in the dining room, and also figurative in the classroom, absolutely. Christy says, a subject librarian I know attended department faculty meetings a couple of times this semester to get a read on what they're focusing on, absolutely. And also lets them know that she's a resource for materials because she can bring up what they have, which aligns with the areas that they're focused. Absolutely, knowing what they're doing helps you know how you can meet their needs. Finding cheerleaders, Lena says, one person in another department can spread the word, absolutely, about working with you, and it works wonders. Elizabeth says, I know email is hard, but I emailed the history faculty and explained what faculty had used the archives, and then explained a few things, types of records that they could use for a class. I got a bunch of responses.
That's great, Elizabeth. My colleague, we all plan to like cold email different faculty, we'll kind of, what courses do we want to teach with? And I haven't got around to doing it as well, but one of my colleagues did that, and she increased her new classes, by a few, even in the pandemic. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. And Heather says advocating the archives through brochures and newsletters, basically just being present in as many places as possible, right? Including what collections have been used by the researchers, Really talking to faculty or chairs about the importance of primary sources is where you start, especially with lower division courses that typically talk about research. And Philip says, probably the instruction librarians in your library can help you make those connections. And I like having cheerleaders and advocates as well. Yeah, teaming up with other people in your library or other people on campus. Rachel and I, like, you know, we're just hanging out and we had some great outcomes as a result. So, and Elizabeth says, I do it a lot. I did it for English too. Awesome. So we got great ideas in the chat about ways to connect, ways to kind of wiggle in there. Let's talk about heavy use collection. I have a collection of letters, college correspondence that I use regularly with a variety of classes, history, religion, sociology. Anyone else have a collection that they've used regularly for different types of classes? Ooh, like this collection can wear many hats based on what it's needed for. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. Anyone else have a collection that they've used regularly for different types of classes?
We have a small collection. It's 4 document boxes, and it's I don't remember what it's the multicultural student organization. So it's it's a lot of broad information. It doesn't really go in depth on any individual student organization, but it does get a lot of use. So it got to be a high priority to be digitized and put online. I don't know if that's completed yet because that takes time. But that was kind of one way to deal with it in case something happens again moving forward and we're off campus, or just we're like, this would be a good thing to have online also.
Heather says, not so much for diverse classes, but we have collections that get used a ton, and they are the ones we are putting on priority lists for digitization. Absolutely.
Yes, we have like directories, which I know aren't exciting or at all, but directories and the old print catalogs that aren't online, we are pushing to get those digitized, but it seems less important, but they get used so much.
Yeah. Yup. Course catalogs, says Heather. Awesome. What are other folks doing with those heavy use? Sometimes being used by different groups all at the same point in the semester too, right? That gets tricky. I'll keep watching the chat, but I also want to talk about this climate education question, and we only have a few minutes left. I'm trying to connect with faculty to do climate change related coursework supported by our archival material. Any advice on connecting with STEM folks? So I think part of the strategies could be what we talked about just in general, connecting with faculty. Who's worked with STEM folks pretty closely? Do you have any environmental collections for STEM? Asks Heather. Yeah. Yes, we do lots of logging wildfires. Heather says we have a few that help pull them in, right? Like it's the whole like, look at the dessert we have, and then you get to like bring them in for the rest of the meal, kind of an idea. I like food analogies. I think it's time for me to eat lunch soon. Yeah.
I wonder about doing like, and I know this is different right now, but doing like a little mini open house for a certain department and have kind of a show and tell of different things on display for research, or to trends. I mean, you could always do like a blog post that highlights different parts of your collection that you want, that you're like, you could be using these great things for climate change. I know exhibits are a lot of work, but I'm like a little mini exhibit or like a small digital one, just to
or like an exclusive reception, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I need to be there. Mm-hmm. It's an
exclusive invite only.
Yeah, and Lena in the comments says, I've had success presenting these types of materials in the context of getting students to connect these high-level environmental issues to their local environment, yes, by showing how these issues have been addressed on campus in the past. And Heather's like, love that. For sustainability classes, this is from Mary, for sustainability classes, I have found that showing them materials, providing snapshots of a moment that students can then build on, draw interest, especially prompting repeat photography. Ooh, I like that. Christy says, check course descriptions. Are they chemistry focused, environmental science, social justice? The areas that align with the collection materials can give you a place to start. Yeah, and it can, like we were talking about, it can inform the things that you sneak in the vegetables with. Absolutely. Angel says, I was very impressed by how my former colleagues at Penn State created a digital exhibition using a range of materials that at first glance aren't obviously related, but do document climate change. And there's a link in the chat for us that will maybe add to the Padlet hopefully soon. Yeah. See, this is why I like connecting with folks, because everybody has great ideas that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of, or resources that can be really, really helpful. So this is why I really value, and hopefully maybe even in the future, we can do more conversational things as well. Because I just love connecting with folks. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to head back to our last slide. Document camera experiences. Wonder what that means, asks Heather. So maybe if somebody could put in the chat a little bit more information on document camera experiences. Maybe it was just story time about like, oh my gosh, what works, what doesn't work. But we'll see if we can follow up with that in the chat. We're right at time, but I want to take just a few moments to go back in. And again, this Padlet is linked. My plan is to take the chat and to add as many of those comments with the things that I think that they're linked to as best I can remember. But we also wanted to share some resources for you. So these are in no way fancy or special, but if you've ever done theater, the last time I did theater, I was in high school, and by done theater, I mean I was in the light booth, but I still hung out with a bunch of theater kids. And so a lot of these things ring true for addiction and projection and warming up your voice, warming up your body, getting the blood flowing. And I made a little playlist for us / for myself. So if you want some jams that hopefully you can listen to get yourself pumped up, those are there for you. And Rachel has shared some other links. Do you want to talk about those, Rachel?
Sorry, I didn't talk about it in today's talk, but I really drew on teaching with primary sources listserv and the collective over the summer. Last summer, they had so many good webinars. And so I really wanted to, because we didn't really go into activities a lot, or techniques, but that was a great resource, the TPS collective. If you're not on that listserv, definitely get on it. And also RBMS has a newsletter on instruction that is also very helpful. Like they are really on top of, getting in there with instruction with RBMS. Mm-hmm. So if you don't already know about them, definitely add them to your bookmarks.
Yes. And like we said, at the bottom of the slides and in the chat before is the link to all of our slides and the Padlet. Rachel, is there anything that you want to say to wrap up this group? Because I want to be mindful of time. I get chatty. So
sure. Thank you everyone for attending. And we did try to, we really knew that we were going to have a lot of experts watching. So we wanted to, have everyone benefit from the knowledge shared. And I hope we didn't go too fast. But again, our slideshow is up for anything you want to go back to and investigate. Feel free to email either of us with any questions you have. Yeah, thank you for coming.
And thanks for letting me be part of the archives world and like sneaking in as my instruction librarian. So it's always fun.
Always, Cara. Always. Your knowledge has been so helpful and helped me learn so much.
Well, and then right back at y'all. So I appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Rachel and Cara. And recording will be up on the section website in a couple of days or so. Thank you all. Have a great Wednesday.